Let's call a meeting to order, please. Alderman Conway, Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro,
Present.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad, Chairwoman Davis.
Present.
4 present. You have a quorum. Thank you. This morning, we have 3 bills before us for the airport, and we will have the presentations done, and we will start with the executive summary and presentation for Board Bill 182.
Good morning, Alderman.
Good morning.
The first board bill, actually both board bills, 182 and 183, are kind of related to each other. Board Bill 182 is a funding request for an emergency project. Per our airport bond indenture, amounts on deposits in the debt service stabilization fund may be withdrawn at any time for airport operational emergencies or emergency debt service needs. We are requesting your approval to transfer $630,000 from the Airport Debt Service Stabilization Fund for an operational emergency. During June 2017, we identified a leaking 5,000-gallon diesel fuel underground storage tank within our airfield maintenance premises. Fuel was quickly removed and placed in a temporary above-ground 1,000-gallon tank to prevent loss of fuel and environmental issues. However, this temporary fix will not be sufficient to permanently sustain our diesel fuel equipment needs during the winter season, and we'll need a permanent solution, which our engineering team recommends a 10,000-gallon above-ground storage tank. The cost of this project is estimated at $630,000. We would like to respectfully request a transfer of this amount from our debt service stabilization fund for this operational emergency to prevent an adverse impact to our fiscal year 18 budget and ensure that we can continue to operate efficiently and maintain compliance with environmental regulations. And at this time, we respectfully request your approval of this project.
Thank you very much. Let's see, do we have any questions of committee members? Let's start with Alderman Vaccaro.
No questions.
Alderman Cone.
No questions.
Alderwoman Howard.
Questions? I move that we pass Board Bill 182.
It's been moved.
Second.
Second. Call the roll, please. Alderman Conway, Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad, Chairwoman Davis. Aye. 4 aye votes do pass. Thank you. Would you like to move on to Board Bill 183?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So Board Bill 183 is the actual request to move forward with the capital project. This draft ordinance or board bill is related to the previous ordinance. We're seeking your approval to amend our Public Works Ordinance 70410 to proceed with the replacement of the 5,000-gallon diesel fuel tank with a 10,000-gallon above-ground diesel fuel tank. So at this time, we would like to respectfully request your approval to move forward with this project.
Do we have any questions of the committee members?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Go right ahead, sir.
So are they going to remove the underground, is this an underground storage tank now?
Yes.
And so they're going to remove the tank that's there?
Mhm.
And I guess I'm familiar with it from a gas station standpoint, where you have to clean up the ground that's beneath it.
Right. It's an environmental.
Right. And
Yeah.
so are you guys also receiving the money, like, well, the super fund? No, there was a super fund for moving tanks where you were limited, at least we were limited to $10,000 in expense. We had to pay for the expense of removing, but when it came to the cleanup, we were only responsible for the first $10,000. Does that also apply at the airport, like under the super fund, or?
We have not looked into that, but I'm not sure if that applies to us at the airport. But we would have, if we would need to, we would use some of our operational budgeted funds.
We have also filed an insurance claim, Alderman Vaccaro, for if there is any environmental cleanup that needs to be done. So we do have insurance on that, and we have filed a claim that we're hoping if there is a cost that is expelled for a cleanup, that would be reimbursable through our insurance claim.
Okay,
That's been filed as a precautionary already.
but, and the $17 million budget to do this, is that, I mean, is it just the cost of, 'cause I just remember when we did it, we didn't spend anywhere close to that kind of money. I just didn't.
The 17 million, it was the capital projects that was part of ordinance 70410.
Okay.
So we're just asking to amend that ordinance to allow for this project.
Allow for the
Yeah,
600.
this project's not that cost, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the 630,000 estimate, and there
This
is a
one.
little bit of contingency in there. We're going to also have to do some concrete work
That's
around
fine.
the new
Yeah,
tank
that-
for strengthening.
That sounds, that's probably about what we paid, so it sounds about right. Okay, I was just curious, because it was a more curious question. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none. Move.
Previous roll.
Are we going to make a
Motion
motion?
to
Motion.
Motion to
Pass
pass
Board
it.
Bill 183 out with a due pass recommendation.
Second and previous roll.
Board Bill 183 is passed.
Thank you.
Board Bill 184, which I will enjoy hearing this presentation the second time.
Good morning, Aldermen, Alderwomen. The airport's requesting your approval today. We've got a local concept restaurant concession agreement with Host International, and they'll be operating a Three Kings Public House, and that'll be in Terminal 2 near Gate E38. There's 2,721 square feet of premises that they will get through this agreement. The term is 8 years, beginning at the end of a build-out period of up to 6 months. Revenue to the airport is a sum equal to the greater of the minimum annual guarantee or the percentage fees for each category listed. ACDBE participation is in the form of a joint venture. The goal was 23%. Host International is going to operate a joint venture with D&D Concessions, and that'll be a 25% ACDBE participation. This agreement was competitively bid out, and 3 bids were received from the Village Bar LLC, presenting the Village Bar, OHM International, presenting Urban Chestnut, and Host International, presenting Three Kings Public House. The bid from Village Bar BRH LLC was rejected for lack of ACDBE good faith efforts, and we're requesting your approval today of Three Kings Public House. Three Kings opened in 2011 in the Del Mar Loop in the University City area, and has 3 current locations in De Pere, in South County, and the U City Loop. And they serve a wide variety of family and adult items. They'll have a full bar and a full lineup of craft beers. We respectfully request your approval of this concession agreement.
This is exciting. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick question. So Host is going to be, it's going to be under Host then?
Yes, sir. It's a separate agreement from their current agreement,
Right.
but it is a Host International.
Okay. And I know Host, they do meet all the DBE, MBE qualifications, if I remember right.
They meet all their goals now, and I believe they're even exceeding it, but I can get
That's what
that
I-
exact
I-
information.
No, I
But
thought they did.
this one is exceeding the goal. It's a joint venture with their current joint venture partner, D&D.
Okay, cool. No, I thought they exceeded but anyway, thank you.
Any other? Okay, that's great.
I make a motion that we pass Board Bill 184 out with a due pass recommendation.
Previous rule.
Moved, second, previous. Board Bill 184 is now passed. Thank you. Rhonda, could I just have a few comments real quick? For a lot of the public who only gets snippets of information, are you in a mode with some public information to share with people about this anticipated process that we're about to go through? And I know that the company, whoever is selected to do this process, will do some, but what we need is just basic information about the points of what we're trying to do. Because the presentation that the mayor had, I thought was a good one, but I think that it needs to be shared with the entire committee here.
Okay.
Actually, it needs to be shared with the whole Board of Aldermen.
Okay,
Because everybody is putting their own spin on this.
Right.
And the worst thing can happen is for our residents to get on the wrong track. And in order for us to get them back on the right track, so they can follow the process and understand it better.
right, right.
So if there's some way we can come up with something, I would really appreciate it.
Okay, and I'll speak to Linda Martinez and to the mayor both about that. Maybe we can share the presentation at a Board of Aldermen, or maybe Linda Martinez can share the presentation. I do know that, and we're talking about the privatization
Right,
process.
absolutely.
Right now, the RFP for an advisor was on the street. That closed a week ago Friday, not last Friday, but the week before. I have not seen the list of bidders. I did ask Linda Martinez the other day, and she said she would expect that it's 60 days before they would award it, and she said she expected that they would take all 60 days. So I would think somewhere here in another, 7 weeks, we should know who the advisor team is going to be. That advisory team would help to look at the overall, if you want to call it financials of the airport, the opportunities that may be out there, and then determine what would be the best for an RFQ to be released. It's my understanding that they are thinking that that process would take about 90 to 120 days. So somewhere in the late spring, maybe early summer, you would see a release for the RFQ. The RFQ would be for qualified firms to submit and show what their qualifications are, and then from that list, determine how many, if any, are qualified to actually go through an RFP. And those firms then would be invited to participate in what would be considered a request for proposals. So there's really not been, to my knowledge, any work done on the drafting of the RFQ because the advisory team hasn't been picked. I would expect that the airport will be very involved in when the advisory team is picked to take a look at just the overall financials of the airport, where we're at with all of our use and lease agreements, all of those things that are obviously critically important to any operator and to any airport. But we have not had any contact or any of that due diligence has begun yet. So,
Because, when I go to neighborhood meetings, they say, well, why are we selling the airport?
I know.
Yeah. That's not what we said.
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I know. It's,
And this first process, the outcome could be that we don't want to go
Right.
to that management route.
That's correct. It could be that. And I think, I think for the process to happen is not a bad thing. I mean, if it brings a better understanding of how the airport operates, if it brings a better understanding, and there was an article that was released yesterday by the Business Journal. They called, I don't know, about a week ago and wanted to do an interview after we announced at the commission meeting that we would be opening another new restaurant. And they kind of just highlighted a number of things that have been happening. As the traffic is growing, then you can also grow other venues. And so, it's one of those things that has a ripple effect. If you've got more traffic and you've got more flights, there's more need for more venues, concessions, opportunities, which is why the lounge came on board. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now that I'm not sure the general population's that aware of. So it's good to get those things out there. But as far as the process, like I said, there isn't anything that has started yet to look at due diligence or to look at where we're at with any of our agreements. I can also tell you that the airlines haven't been contacted yet.
Oh, okay.
So I had a call from them the other day asking if we know who the advisory team's going to be. So I did have Linda respond to the airlines on that through the AAAC, the Airline Advisory Committee.
Okay.
So they're all waiting too, because obviously they have a big piece and a big say-so in the process.
Okay. Alderman McCarr?
I had a question, it's just a little bit different subject. So the pilot's not flying the smaller planes out of American Airlines, and I know the amount of pilots doesn't relate to the amount of flights, but
Right.
how many flights are we going to lose?
We actually should not lose any flights. I've had a lot of conversations with American. the expectation is that they will actually see larger aircraft here. So the MD-80 fleet, which is an aging fleet, there is a new FAA regulation that is effective October 1 of 2018, which requires a retrofit on that particular aircraft. American has decided that that aircraft is not worth spending the money on this retrofit. So they're closing, and that base had always been based in St. Louis because the MD-80 was a TWA aircraft. So that pilot base, which was specifically for the MD-80, is being replaced by the new 737s, which actually seat more passengers than the MD-80s. In chatting with American, they've told me, and so far the schedule is bearing that out, at least the one that's published right now for next year. Now, this doesn't happen until September of 18. So that schedule is not really out there yet. It's more the spring and summer of next year. But that we should actually see the new 737s coming into here, which should offer more seats than what the current MD-80 aircraft is. So we're hoping that that doesn't relate to smaller aircraft being flown in lieu of the MD-80s. It actually relates to larger aircraft and newer aircraft being flown. All of those pilots then, if they're not retiring, will transition to another airplane, and depending on where that airplane is based, whether it's Dallas, Chicago, Miami, New York, or LA, would depend where they would be based then.
Thank you. I'm just curious.
Okay, any other? Okay. My last thing very quickly is, we have an airport that has a lot of empty space. That's all
Getting
that
less empty, but yeah, I know.
empty, but I had to say that. And so one of the things that I appreciate, and the committee members may not know that, is that we are having discussions on how to use that space, and most especially the best use of the space.
Right.
And so hopefully, that's something else I think that board members need to know.
Okay.
Because we meet people wherever, and questions that they're just thrown out at you, and if we don't have appropriate information, it's not good.
Right.
Yeah, it's not good at all.
Well, and I think the things that we're looking at, you know, I think the committee's aware that we reopened 4 gates this past May. That was on the D concourse that had been closed down. We're working with Southwest currently on a number of things. One is looking at an additional baggage carousel and whether we need to build an additional baggage carousel in Terminal 2 to fit that growth. Also looking at, does the next set of gates, is Southwest interested in a next set of gates coming down that D concourse based on their schedule? So there's a lot of moving parts right now. I think one of the things that we will be looking at going into the beginning of next year with these new open gates, once we have, the new Starbucks will open next week. The lounge will open in December, and then hopefully the 3 Kings restaurants will open somewhere April to May.
Hopefully mid-May.
Mid-May. I think as we get those venues open, we'll have to take a look. Is it meeting the demands of the customers in that new area? Because that new area is packed, and there may actually be an opportunity to look at another venue. Maybe, you know, maybe it's a smaller one, a bar, or maybe it's some sort of another opportunity. But you know, we've pretty much on the A concourse, we have filled out all the empty space that there was. Air Canada recently took their own gate. They had been subleasing through United, so they now have their own gate. And we opened a new Vino Volo and a new Sweet Indulgences in the last month. So A concourse is full up. There's nothing open on A. On the C concourse, we added 27 and 28 as additional gates for opportunity for a carrier to come in. We still have the end of that, what we used to know as the old dome, where the larger 747s and L10s operated. That's still closed off, and that's not a renovated part of the airport. So we do have an opportunity. We're looking at that about, is there an interest enough to be able to start thinking about that renovation? And then on that D concourse corridor, at what point would we reopen that so that passengers could walk through from Terminal 1 to Terminal 2 if they chose to do so? So those are some of the things we're looking at. We are required under the FAA plan to do a new master plan. So that will happen in beginning of 2019. So, and the master plan looks at a 20-year look at where the airport's going. And so the last one was done in 2006, 7 or 8, I believe. I was still with the airlines because I know they came and asked us questions. So we're in the process now of starting to think about that and engaging the community in those conversations. I mean, everybody heard yesterday probably that the vote in Kansas City passed for the new terminal. So I know my phone's been ringing off the wall wanting to know if the impact is here. You know, from a standpoint, that doesn't give, and Southwest will be the first to tell you this, that really doesn't give Kansas City an edge over St. Louis. They still go where the traffic goes and where the numbers are, and our numbers are stronger, and so they are a good partner in Kansas City as well. But I think Southwest was so behind that because it's such a dysfunctional terminal today. It's not a good terminal, and it's been challenging because there's no concessions or customer experience there. So I don't look at that, but I think it bodes for us to be able to make sure that in this next master plan, we fully engage the community to understand what does the next 20 years look like. And the master plan, we will engage whether or not the privatization process is taking, because we have a requirement.
That's a requirement.
It's a requirement under the FAA. So that'll start in an RFP would probably go out for what company consulting, and that is 75% funded by the FAA because it's one of their requirements. So it's roughly a $4 million process. 75% funded by the FAA, about $1 million funded from the airport to have a consultant come on. And it's an 8 to 10 month process usually to really take a look. So expect that in the latter part of next year to go out, and then that will help us take a look and say, what else do we need to do? Are we interested in, I mean, the cargo development is finally starting to move along, so we're seeing some progress there. They are starting to move their equipment in on site to start that cleanup of that facility over there. So there's some things happening on that end. And, you know, anytime this committee, you want any briefing on anything, just tell us whether it's a meeting or not. We're happy to come down and brief and give people an idea. But, you know, this has been a pretty strong year in terms of things that are opening and pieces of the terminals that are getting renovated. Some of our tenants whose facilities are starting to look a little aged, we've also working with them to close down and renovate those facilities like the bagel shop. So that'll be happening here shortly where that gets closed down and a renovation of that, because it's important that we continue to look at, you know, is every venue up to our expectation?
I need a fun venue there.
Okay, what do you want?
I don't know, but when I used to travel all the time, I was excited when I could go in and in the game room, play games.
Oh, the video
or
room,
go-
okay.
And I could go, it was another.
We had an
fun venue
arcade at
we
one
had.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and a lot of people who do a lot of traveling need to release some stress.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can find something to do.
I'm sorry?
Chair massage?
We had that in the past. It didn't do very well. We also had one of the express spas, and for a number of years, it just never took off. I think some airports it does. For here, I don't know if it was that people didn't have as much dwell time, and you know but
I wonder nationwide how they do.
yeah, there are some airports where they do well.
Extremely well.
Yeah, there are some, and you're seeing yoga rooms being opened. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we actually tried it both in Terminal 2 and in Terminal 1 on the C concourse, and neither location really worked.
Stats on what the average layover time is at Lambert?
We do. Right now, pretty much, you know, American's got a small percentage of connecting traffic, about 2. Southwest is bringing in about 20%. So of the 3.5 to 4 million passengers that Southwest will in-plane this year, they have about 7 million total when you look at deplaning, but about 20% of that is connecting, and they make very tight connections. So they're scheduled less than 45 minutes. Now, and one of the reasons that they have been morphing a lot of that activity from Midway to St. Louis is because what we call the completion factor, that ability for that passenger to connect as scheduled, is so much higher here than it was in Midway. So, you know, they schedule pretty tight. So you even see it with the growth of traffic that we're seeing, the majority of that's coming from connecting traffic. You're not seeing the revenue grow as quickly because it is a passenger that only has, you know, or less, in most cases less than that. So they may stop and grab a to-go sandwich or a quick soda or, you know, something, but they're not they're not shopping, they're not necessarily sitting down and having that sit-down meal. Now, if there is a misconnect, then that changes that, or the diversions have been helpful, because every time Chicago has weather, we get the diversions, and so if they offload those, they may be in the airport for 3 or 4 hours. But the schedule time is pretty short on the connecting, and they have the bulk of it.
Because you don't see people lingering along the
No,
airport.
no. And usually, even if people are coming out, you don't see people coming out for 3 hours. We are hoping, and we've seen this a little bit with Vino Volo, if they know there's a good venue and they can come out and have a nice meal or a nice lunch, we are seeing people that will get there earlier and say, you know what, I'll go down to Vino Volo. And I think with the lounge opening at Terminal 2, we'll see the same thing. So we're hoping that, and that is something that you'll start hearing and seeing, is that they're going to start marketing pretty heavily for that wingtip lounge. And they're going to put a panel together of just different business people in the community to say what's important to you, to make sure they're hitting all the marks. But I know they've already got several corporations who have come on and bought memberships here in the St. Louis area with them. So I think you'll see some people come out earlier as a result of, if you've got that opportunity and you know ahead of time that you can go in, sit down, eat, drink, have a lunch, or a conference room available, then you're more likely to come out earlier.
Well, that's good to hear. I wanted to take an opportunity, because I don't know if there had been a formal introduction of our legal counsel and our financial analysts. So would you guys take an opportunity to come to a mic and formally introduce yourselves?
Certainly. My name's Lou Galley, and I am legal counsel to the Board of Aldermen.
I'm Gerard Hollins. I am financial analyst to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay. And so at any point, they may be working on our behalf. Okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay? All right.
And I think I'll send an email out to all of our staff with your names and your contacts. I'm assuming, Jean, you can get the contact for me. But that way, if you call and need something, people at least know who you're affiliated with and what the name is in case we have it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.